Hello everyone, this is Aegon of Astora, and welcome back to my casual playthrough of Dark Souls. This is episode 22, being recorded on Sunday the 13th of September. I hope that you're all having a fantastic day today, whenever it is that you find yourself watching this. So it's been a little while since I've recorded, and there are of course a number of reasons for that. Most notable of which is just the fact that I've been incredibly busy with the start of the academic year, and right now I'm kind of tired, and probably shouldn't be recording, but here we are anyway, so I hope that the commentary isn't entirely incoherent, especially because I'm going to start off today by addressing a few comments that have been accumulating in my Word document that I use to keep track of the comments that I want to address. And so as always, if you want to skip the comment section and go right to the action, if you look in the video description, there will be a series of timestamps that will allow you to do just that. I wanted to start briefly with a comment I received from Caleb Fiction CL, and I believe it was on episode 19. It was a very nice and brief comment that said, "You're the best, man. You're great at this game." Well, thank you kindly. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because I don't generally bring up comments like that, is that I wanted to let Caleb know that I wanted to reply to your comment to say thank you, and that also to add that I'm not great at the game. I'm just played it enough to kind of know what to do and what not to do, and I know, over time you accumulate a rather sizable bag of tricks, I guess you could say. But more importantly, to point out that there's something, I don't really understand how the whole Google Plus and YouTube integration thing works, or at least how it's supposed to work. But yeah, I can't reply to your comment, and Caleb, I'm bringing this up because you did make a comment on one of my other videos. I can't remember what the context was or what the question was. I believe it was asking about the possibility of me doing a Dark Souls 2 Let's Talk Lore series. And indeed, I do intend at some point in the future to have a, community-centric playthrough for all of the Souls games that I have access to. But Dark Souls 2, since I've already done and it obviously wasn't the same since it was my first playthrough, the quality is rather poor of the audio mixing, and, there were really no comments other than a couple for me to address. So it's really different, of course, than the Bloodborne Let's Talk Lore that I'm doing, which is, light years kind of beyond that which I did initially. And in addition to that, I also have the Scholar of the First Sin playthrough that I did, which was kind of a casual playthrough, but I did talk a fair bit about the lore in that playthrough, and I believe you specifically asked about Aldia's dialogue and whether I might be speaking to that, and that is something that I spoke to in that playthrough. So I would say that eventually, I don't know whether it'll be 6 months from now, or a year from now, or 2 or 3 years from now. I don't know that I'm going to continue making videos that long. But, I can't really say what tomorrow is going to bring, let alone a few months from now. So I wanted to thank you for that comment and the one that you left on episode 19 of this series. But also wanted to point out, and I'll see if I can track down a tutorial or something that explains what it is you need to do to allow your comments to be replyable, I guess, on YouTube. But Caleb, I wanted you to know that, I'm not ignoring your comments. I wanted to reply to a couple of them, but I simply am unable to do so. There's no reply button on your comments. But thank you, nevertheless.
Emergency. Incoming enemy fighters. Prepare for launch.
I also had a comment from Dima Parachute from episode 19, and Dima Parachute offered a valid hypothetical, I guess, devil's advocate rebuttal to my complaints about fair use. And I'm not going to address point by point just because it's a long comment, and I don't have a lot of time to record today, and that would kind of turn this into long story short, it's a valid comment. You can go check it out on episode 19. But there was the last paragraph, I believe, in Dima Parachute's comment that I did want to address, just because it got me thinking about certain things. And so, Dima, this is, again, not the full comment, but just a part of it. So Dima Parachute writes, I can't say if it's right or wrong, that is about Nintendo monetizing nostalgia, which was my argument in that episode. I can't say if it's right or wrong because the video game business is a cutthroat business these days, and it's hard to stay afloat. Companies either have to scam or struggle to survive, as every game coming out can potentially turn into a loss. And let's face it, Nintendo might make a lot of money, but according to their shareholders, their future is quite uncertain. Okay, so there's more from the comment that I want to read out and address, but I just wanted to start by saying, and I don't mean this directed personally to you, Dima Parachute, but just kind of the sentiment that is being communicated here, and it's a sentiment that I see from many, many, many gamers who are discussing, the issue of subpar video games and concerns about pre-ordering, and how, as you put it, I'll just read the one sentence again, that the video game, it's a cutthroat business these days, and companies either have to scam or struggle to survive. And also that, according to their shareholders, their future is quite uncertain. So that last sentence, according to their shareholders, their future is quite uncertain. To which I will say, I don't give a shit what their shareholders think, and neither should you. No one should care, unless you're a shareholder of Nintendo. You shouldn't give a shit. And you certainly, under no circumstances, should use that. And I'm not saying, again, that you, Dima Parachute, are doing this, but this is something I've seen in the context of Destiny and a number of other games. People saying the argument essentially boils down to, well, because capitalism. That's not an argument. It's not an argument. It's not a justification. It's neither necessary nor sufficient as a means of explaining or justifying crappy business practices that are exploitative, they are immoral, and they are problematic. And so I guess I'll just get into the reasons why you shouldn't give a shit. And it relates to what you were saying about how, that they will lose money. When a company, and especially when a publicly traded company says, that they posted a loss of X amount of dollars in a given year, there's no, the math that's being used there is not math that, it's not like they have a bank account and at the end of the year they look at their bank account and say, oh, well, we have $1,000 more than we did last year, therefore we made $1,000 profit. What they're describing when they say that they made a profit or that they incurred a loss is some, net income. It's the accounting term, the financial term for it is net income. Net income isn't a cash in, cash out sum. It's not a sum of those things. It is a socially constructed, completely, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not self-evident. There's no, universal mathematical proof to net income. And again, I'll remind anyone who, maybe hasn't been around for very long or has forgotten that I've said this. I studied accounting for my undergraduate degree. So I spent a lot of time puzzling over what net income is, what it means, and how manipulable it is. That you can, there's a term, for example, called taking a bath. if in a given year your company is struggling, and if you're incurring a massive quote-unquote loss anyway, there's no reason not to, say, begin writing things off that you've been holding off for on a number of years. There are so many tricks, so many judgment calls that need to be made to determine whether something or someone or a company in general has made a profit or incurred a loss. And often what actually happens when a company incurs a loss, or when they say, we lost this much money on this product, or, we're not making enough money to be able to continue developing this product. It's not that they're not making enough money to pay their employees and to, cover the costs of whatever it is that they needed to pay for to develop that game. Often what it means is that it falls below the percentage of profit that they arbitrarily set as their target. So if, they wanted to grow by 3% in a given year, they wanted to grow, well, that's when it's a long rant, when your console starts saying, okay, we're going to go to sleep now. It's all socially constructed. There is, yes, to some degree, money dries up, and money is a thing that exists, but money is also electronic. Money is also tied to, in some cases, nothing. It's called fiat currency. It's so, again, there's enough people who will explain things away by saying, oh, well, that's just capitalism, or, that's their company, their job is to make money. No, that's, if you're a business analyst, if you're a financial analyst, if that's your job, sure, go nuts with those explanations. But if you are someone who is being ripped off, or otherwise wrong has been done to you, if you've purchased a product that isn't what you were told it was, isn't what it was marketed as, then you should never in a million years concede that point. Because, again, these things, they're not, you can't just go to the company, you can't read the financial statements without having had the sufficient kind of educational background to be able to understand what they mean. Because it's not as simple as, we made this much money and we spent this much money. That's not net income. Okay, and I'll just wrap this up really quick because I've been ranting for a while now. Demon Parachute goes on to say, and I honestly felt bad when I watched some E3 videos, which were nothing but promises, and everything seemed like it was all business talk and profit motive from EA, Activision, and such. But I saw Shigeru Miyamoto talk about the new Star Fox game, and he looked genuinely excited. It looked like he wanted people to have fun. He talked about it with such excitement and motivation, which many people in the industry do not have anymore, and might not have for a very long time. So I'm going to take a drink here before I continue. Because I'm very glad that you brought up E3, and even EA, which I'm going to get to in a minute, but just to wrap up the thread on video games as business. Yes, video games are a business. They're multi-billion-dollar a year business. One of the largest industries in the world now. But even still, you may or may not, I don't like the phrase voting with your wallet because I don't think that actually works. But I do think that discourse is important, and that you can vote with your wallet, but there's no real information content there beyond just simply, our revenue was down X percentage this week. But if enough people start actually pushing back about certain things, if the discourse becomes such that they are forced to take note, then that's when I think real change can occur. But that aside, I'm going to include a link in the video description to a video posted by Namco Bandai. And not because it's by Namco Bandai, but because it provides a very brief glimpse into what it's like inside FromSoft. And I believe that this video would have been made or released in 2010, 2011, because it towards the end it's promoting Dark Souls 1 a little bit, but the Main takeaway from the video for me, what I found amazing about it, was, and I don't recall the name of the gentleman who's kind of the tour guide, I guess, of the From Software office, but he's a producer. It's not Miyazaki, it's someone else, but he describes FromSoft's philosophy. Well, first he starts talking about how they didn't think that Demon's Souls would be nearly as popular as it was, but they put essentially their hearts and souls into it, metaphorically and I guess literally, and it wound up being incredibly popular, and that's great. But he went on to kind of explain why it is that was significant by saying that their philosophy, so their most basic principle as a company is, quote, not to get caught up in chasing what's popular, but to make games based on what we value, and the we in that sentence being FromSoft. Amazing, brilliant, and again, no surprise given the games that FromSoft has produced. And granted, they have since that time been purchased by a much larger company, counterbalanced, hopefully, perhaps, by the fact that Miyazaki is now the president. But until such time as they begin to show, and so I guess we'll see with Dark Souls 3, whether, that begins to slip, whether they're chasing what was popular with the previous Souls games, or whether they stick to their principle, their most basic principle, and make that game based on what it is that they value. We'll see, but the link is in the description. I believe it's called From Software Studio Profile. Very short, brief video, but I highly recommend that you check it out, because you also get a glimpse of, what seems very much to be kind of a communal atmosphere. No one really seems there to be, the power suit professional with, Bluetooth headset and, oh yeah, profit was down 2% from year over year. And, but yeah. And there's another video that I wanted to draw everyone's attention to. And if any of you followed E3, you might have seen this already, because it was, kind of a big story. And the fact that it's a big story says a lot as well about what E3 has become, which Demon Parachute alluded to. And it is a video of, ironically enough, at the EA press conference, or at least I believe it was EA. It was of Martin Salin, the creative director at Coldwood Interactive, which is a Swedish developer. And Martin went on stage shaking. His hands were shaking. You can see there's one point in the video where he reaches into his jacket, pulls something out. His hands were shaking. Incredibly nervous. And he starts talking about his game, Unravel, and about that which inspired him to make it. I sat there pretty much all day during that day of E3, just watching press conferences, and Demon Parachute, again, hit the nail on the head by talking about how it was all, business savvy, and like everything was really sleek and highly produced and fake, really, really fake. And, we've all grown so used to that. And so that's why I think when Martin came out and started telling a story about how it is that he was inspired, the idea that he had while he was camping with his family in the woods to make this game, I was in tears watching it. I freaking wept because it was just so beautiful. Here's this person at EA's press conference, of all places, who has this opportunity to release a game that was born out of just this wonderful artistic inspiration, and that hopefully will, actually see his labors bear fruit. And I don't just mean that financially. I mean in the sense of him actually seeing people enjoying his game and getting the same emotional gratification out of it that he very obviously got by being there at E3 to talk to people about it. He was excited about it. He was happy about it. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about profit. And yeah, so all of this is basically to say that I think that it's a false dichotomy to say that, games either have to be really, really good on their own or people have to scam. You don't have to scam at all. You can make good games and you could not rip people off. You could make money. You might not be able to reach, 8% growth rate or whatever the financial analysts are calling for that quarter. But you can, you can still do these things without being awful to people. All right, I think that might be my longest rant yet. I could be wrong about that, though, but we shall see. So I did walk away from the bonfire there so that we could get away from the noise of the bonfire while I was ranting, because it's incredibly loud, especially when it's kindled. I'm not sure if there's actually a difference between it being kindled once and 3 times versus, in terms of the amount of noise it makes, but... Yeah, sorry, I'm all worked up now from that rant. Great comments from Dima Parachute, and I also had a comment from... I had a really great comment from, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation as I usually do, Allison Arcano, who, on episode 19, but again, it's a whole other can of worms, but I did mention to Allison that I would try to touch on it, just as I mentioned to Yura Beach 2, that I would try to touch on his or her comment in this episode as well. But just so you both know, I'm keeping them in my list. But just so that this episode isn't me ranting the entire time, I might have to save them for a future episode. But yes, I hope you'll forgive me for that. When this episode started, you will have noticed, or you should have noticed, that we got obliterated by a black dragon. So, yeah, this guy is a dragon slayer, so we might as well go talk to him and see if he has any advice for us.
Tomorrow, is the black dragon posing the duress? Yes, I thought as much. He's called Kalameet. Ferocious dragon indeed. Even mighty Anna Londa dared not provoke his ire. I see little good coming from this, but my intent is to persevere to the bitter end. Good, good. What is bravery without a dash of recklessness? I've taken a liking to thee, and I owe thee much for thy service to Artorias. Now, watch, and see how Gough hunts dragons. Yes, a truer shot was never loosed. That bat will be grounded for a good spell. The rest is in thine hands. I await good tidings. Dragon slaying, knighthood's highest calling.
It's been said by many, many people before, but I suppose it bears repeating. But Go is a badass. A couple of things I noticed during that cinematic that I never noticed before. The first is what appears to be Anor Londo. And it's very hard to get a view of it, but yeah, that appears to be Anor Londo up there. And let me equip my binoculars so that you can actually see what it is I'm talking about, rather than just squinting at your screen going, where? Where's Anor Londo? Right there, the walls of Anor Londo. Or at least I think that that's Anor Londo. It certainly looked that way in the cinematic. And the other thing was that when Gough got up, just soot, just these, these shavings here were falling off him basically the entire time he was standing. Suggesting that he had been in that sitting position for a very, very long time. And now that I'm looking at my comments list, I realize that I probably should have, because it's been a few days since I added comments to it, I should have went back and looked, because there was someone who mentioned that a middle ground between the two possibilities that I conveyed in the previous episode. Either he doesn't know, that is, either he doesn't know that his helmet's packed with resin, and that therefore he thinks he's blind, that he's, kind of dumb, and doesn't realize that he just has resin in his helmet, or that, yeah, he's genuinely blind, and that that's something else. Someone, I wish I could remember who it was, but someone posited a third possibility, that they packed resin in his helmet, and as a result of the resin, he went blind. Indeed, that seems just as reasonable, if not more so, than the other two explanations. Okay, so now we are going to head off and fight Kalameet. Not my best boss fight. In fact, probably one of, no, I don't know if I want to say one of my worst, but again, I mentioned this previously, that I've not practiced the DLC nearly as much as I have the rest of the game, so Rip Artorias. I wonder what Kieran does after you give her the soul. And that is a question that we are going to revisit later on, or at least we're going to have a possible answer to that question. So obviously, in order to trigger the intro that you saw where Kalameet kills us, we had to come down this way. But I did not pick up any of the items along the way, just in case there was anything significant that we might want to discuss. I'm not going to talk about the dogs, simply because I don't really know what to make of them, but they have, they don't look like normal dogs. This is something that Plague of Gripes in his Let's Play Dark Souls playthrough went into an enormous amount of detail about, and occasionally R-rated detail. And you all know me well enough to know that that's, like, I found that a few parts of that episode kind of funny, but generally that's not my type of humor. So but I will leave a link in the description to that episode where he talks about that. But again, and I believe I did mention this when we were in the Royal Wood, that we have these weird mini spires almost that contain fluid, but also like vapors from the abyss, like the abyss oil and like abyss vapor, I guess, or abyss exhaust. I don't really know. Previously, when we came down this way, again before the intro, there was no fog gate there, and we're pretty stacked. We upped our endurance to 60, and we're now at 78 poise. So if it weren't for that, I'm sure that these dogs would be stun locking me like crazy. But it does appear as though that ridiculous amount of poise that we added has really helped in that regard. And we actually have a summon here. Something odd. Indeed, very odd. Mask of the Child Wanderer set, and a katana. It looks like an Uchi katana, but I'm not sure. And Silver Knight shield. DLC is really just beautiful. There is a crystal lizard. Visions of Dragon Shrine from Dark Souls 2 here. Yeah, there's a crystal lizard down there. Right on top of the soul counter. I'm not going to bother with it because I think we have just about everything we need in terms of upgrade materials. And I did mention earlier on I wanted to mix up the armor choices a little bit, but unfortunately I don't have the time to do the farming anymore, so we are more or less going to stick with the Elite Knight set for the rest of the game. We will continue mixing up the weapons, but armor-wise, this will probably just be it for the, notwithstanding any changes we make for weight considerations, so that we might fast roll. But yeah, go shot down Black Dragon Kalameet, which should provide us with the opportunity to fight him. So let's go see if we can't do that, shall we?
Help me!
So I said at the outset of this episode that I was probably too tired to be recording. That, most certainly true. Or, I think I said I was probably too tired to be recording at the beginning of the episode, and that really demonstrated it in spades. Most notably because I was getting incredibly greedy. Anytime I had him, even at 75% HP, I was taking a third hit when I really should have been just hitting twice and then rolling away. But then there's also the issue of the camera as well. And that's the one thing that really drives me nuts about this fight in particular. Is the camera is just... And it's not even the camera itself. It's mostly that when you're turning facing him and you think you might be in lock-on range, and you lock onto him, what happens, of course, is this. It'll do like a 90 degree or 180 degree camera shift. So you're expecting to be able to lock onto him so that you can strafe. But what ends up happening is, you're looking at him, and then, if your camera's facing there, then it'll just... Well, you would have seen it during the boss fight, but if it wasn't immediately obvious what was happening when my camera was shifting, that was that. So this area seems very much to be Darkroot Basin. So there is, of course, a very similar waterfall occurring right around there. And we get ourselves another Titanite slab, which I think we're going to use to upgrade our Claymore to plus 15, because even though I got very, very lucky with the Dark Wraith drops early on in terms of the Titanite slabs, after that initial, the 4 or 5 that dropped, can't remember how many there were, my drop rate has, it's been 0 essentially. We've been getting decent Titanite chunks. I have how many Titanite chunks now? A ridiculous amount. 31 of them. And, yeah, no Titanite slab. So there is a shiny here in the distance. I can't recall exactly what it is, so we're going to go grab that. And then we're going to check out the item description for the Calamity Ring. If only Hawkeye were here. So this is a developer message. If only Hawkeye were here. Artorias, maybe? Although, if we're to assume that it was a chosen undead who left this message, and if you're watching my Bloodborne Let's Talk Lore playthrough, you'll probably know that this is something I find very interesting, developer messages. Because in some cases, yeah, you can hand-wave them as gameplay things. Although I guess in this case it kind of is as well. Giving a hint to the player that, you're not going to be able to kill this boss unless you go get the assistance of Hawkeye Gough. But even that you could make the counterpoint of how the heck is someone, I'm sure it's possible, but how is someone who's struggling at this boss and, unable to figure out that you need Gough to shoot him down? How would you how would you even be able to get over to this message? But that seems to be the clue there, because for the exact same reason why we came over here. I saw a shiny, I saw an item, and said, let's go get it. So I guess they're assuming that, if someone comes down here and they keep dying to Kalameet, if they picked up those items over there, they're going to see this one in the distance, come over here, see this message, and then go, if only Hawkeye were here. But then again, you have to figure out who is Hawkeye Gough. So, you'll need to remember, if you've not already spoken to Gough, one of the special rings, Hawkeye Gough. And then know that, yeah, you're supposed to go and speak with Gough. And more evidence of that, that they put that in there specifically as a hint. Gough's Great Arrows, which I believe we read the description for, but just in case we haven't. Great Arrow used by Hawkeye Gough, one of Lord Gwyn's 4 knights, for dragon slaying, requires great bow. Gough personally crafted each stone tip and wraps the shaft tightly with tree bark. Yeah, so we did read that one. So yeah, so maybe this one, because I can't think of who else would have left it. In Bloodborne, it's a fair bit more muddy, just because, there's no soapstone. It's you basically are in commune with the messengers with your notebook, and that doesn't necessarily only apply to the player character. There are other characters within the world who seemingly have the ability to do that. But yeah, that aside, very nice boss room. But at this point, since I've died so many times, I have no idea how long this episode is going to be. I am well over an hour in my recording. And there were a couple of other things I wanted to do before we wrapped up. And so I'm going to assume that a lot of my fighting against Kalameet will be edited down into a montage. And I say that because I shouldn't say assume, because I'm going to be the one who's editing it. But I don't know how long that's going to end up being, so I'll cut out a few things that I had originally planned on doing. And there's a sun there, by the way. I'll cut out a few things that I was originally planning on doing, but there is 2, maybe 3 things that we're going to go do really quick anyway, so let's go do that.
Why, thou hast defeated Kalameet? Wondrously played. Lord Gwyn's blessing upon thee. That beast will never take to the skies again. Dragons shall never be forgotten. We knights fought valiantly. But that farewell, proud human. May every honor be bestowed upon thee.
Well, thank you kindly. I thought he was going to give us his great bow, but I think he might only actually do that if you're able to kill Kalameet without his assistance, which is possible. I've never done it, but I know it is possible. Okay, so that was kind of disappointing. We didn't read the item description for the Calamity Ring, so let's do that now. Calamity Ring, a ring enchanted by the orange eye of Kalameet, the bringer of calamity. Doubles damage received by its wearer. A useless ring befitting of no finger. Best left unknown, or at least well hidden.
I have awaited thee. Thou hast rescued Princess Dusk, and rid us of that terrible primeval human, even halting the spread of the abyss. I salute the grandeur of thine enterprise. Please allow me to express my gratitude. I thank thee, as do we all. I will remember thee, but I will keep thy story to myself. This is the best way. For thou art come from a time far ahead. No one will sing thy praises, but yet thy greatness shall live on, for it shall be my purpose to remember all thou hast done for us. Was thine eye glancing hither? Thou needst not hide thy wonder. I am a mushroom. May the flames guide thee.
Okay, interesting to note that Elizabeth basically says, I'm not going to tell anyone that it was you because then shit gets too complicated. You came from the future. So even though she knows that it wasn't Artorias who went and slayed the Abyss, she nevertheless still thinks that it was a single person. And so this would seem to run counter to what I was saying in the, I believe it was episode 18 or 19, about the myth, the individualistic, grand heroic narrative of Artorias. And that it's never so simple as, just one person going and doing some brave heroic thing. does not change. That still remains the same. Why? Because simply of what I've said in the past about Souls, about the Souls series. I'm not here, I didn't, slay Artorias and Manus by myself. I did it with the help of all of the players, including all of you watching out there, however indirectly. I've never been a Souls player in a vacuum. I've always existed as part of a community. So even though individually, yes, we are all technically responsible for doing certain things in the game, these things wouldn't have been possible were it not for, the help, whether through messages, whether through supportive words or comments, or you guys just watching my videos. No person exists in a vacuum. Everyone has a network of things and people, or everyone exists, I should say, deeply embedded in a network of things and people and stuff that exists around them. No one can exist on their own. So even though she makes it seem as though, once again, that it was just a single individual who came and rescued Dusk and fought back the spread of the Abyss, which would seem in the present day to not really be true, because the Abyss does still exist, and that's something we will talk about, obviously, when we get there. And it's no longer the chasm of the Abyss, because I mentioned in, I believe it was the last episode, that chasm is probably a clue, and I had the definition on the screen, but chasm is, something, it opens up into something. So that evidently, where we were, was the place where the Earth opened up, and inside of that fissure, whether it be geological or metaphorically speaking, we were entering, or at least we were nearby the Abyss. We were almost at the point where the Earth ended and the Abyss began. But later we're going to go into the Abyss proper. So we may have halted the spread of the Abyss, but we didn't fight it back. We didn't destroy it. So really, what's changed? I'm not sure. But it wasn't just a single person doing these things. I had just slain those enemies with the help of all those who came before me, and all those who exist alongside me now. I couldn't have learned this game on my own. It's possible. I've pointed out throughout this playthrough, it's possible. The clues are there. But you need to understand many fundamental things about the game and its mechanics and how the designers think before you are really able to kind of piece things together. But we all exist in a community, in a network. And I'm not any more responsible for slaying Artorias or for slaying Manus than Artorias was. They're both myths, legends that glorify individuals that really should glorify communities and people that exist in collectives. But yeah. I should also point out that lost in the rant that I wanted to give just there was the fact that she gifted us 3 of Elizabeth's mushrooms. Large medicinal mushroom of Elizabeth, keeper of the sanctuary. Eating this mushroom invigorates the flesh and greatly restores HP for a limited duration. Its dramatic effect can make the difference between a warrior's life and death. So if you've only played Dark Souls 2, and you've wondered what the heck this item is, it's called Elizabeth's Mushrooms because it would seem to be her flesh, I guess you could say. However it is that you would describe it, yep. She gives you a part of herself. 3 scraps of herself. Which is very intriguing, strange, but also kind of nice at the same time. Thank you, Elizabeth, kindly. So is this the same place? I don't really know. Anor Londo seems to be in the right spot relative to where we were when we thought we saw Anor Londo. The long ladder seems to be in exactly the same spot. Suggesting that it is in fact the same ladder. And the distance seems about the same. Although there were two waterfalls, if I recall correctly. One was next to the ladder, which didn't seem to have nearly as much water flowing down it. And then the other one was over here somewhere. So, I don't know. It seems very much like the same place. But even though we're hollow, there is a summon sign here.
I am Dusk of Oolacile. It is an honor to see thee again. I shall follow thy wishes. My home of Oolacile was reduced to ashes long ago in my time. I have been alone ever since, but to be summoned thus, and to be of service to thee, it is most rewarding. Oh, forgive me. Such a long past time is none of thine concern. This may strike thine ear as somewhat peculiar, but long ago, in my homeland of Oolacile, I was beset by a creature from the abyss. I would have perished then, were it not for the great knight Artorius. In truth, I saw little of what transpired, for mine senses were already fled, but even still, there was something about Artorius, a certain balance of the humours that quite perfectly fits your semblance. Heavens, could it be that? Would this be of assistance to thee? Oh, dear me. That was Oolacile, many centuries ago. Please excuse my fanciful musings. This may strike in, but that have would this. Oh. If thou art in need, pray summon me again. I wish to be of assistance. May the flames guide thee.
Very interesting. So in case you were unaware, when she says a certain balance of the humors, in early modern medicine, it was thought that one's health was determined by the four humors, which was it was almost analogous to the four Aristotelian elements. So that, and I'm trying to remember the four humors specifically. This is again something I talked about in my Bloodborne playthrough. Bile, black bile, phlegm, and something else. But basically, it was thought that if you were healthy, or if, for a body to be really healthy, and I'm completely failing at this explanation. Basically, it was thought that there were four humors inside of your body, and that we are in our optimal state, our optimal health and well-being, when those four humors were in balance, when there was a balance of the four humors. And so she, and that if you were out of balance, if you were sick, then that's often what led to bloodletting, as an perhaps ill-fated attempt to bring the four humors back into balance. It was a very of its time procedure, but yeah, she says that there was something about us, a certain balance of the humors, that leads her to think, that reminds her, when she looks at us, of Artorius. And so, of course, she's referring to the fact that we were the ones who rescued her. But she thinks it was Artorias, perhaps because Elizabeth told her that it was Artorias, or perhaps just once again, the legend of Artorias kind of precedes itself in such a manner that, even though it wasn't actually him, that's kind of the assumption everyone has. But yeah, I have no idea where we are in terms of length for this episode, but that seems as good a place to call it as any. So, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.